This is the first time the Jaycees have tried a program like this, or decided to do a program like this. Hopefully next year we'll have a lot better turnout, but this is something we'd like to continue to do each year. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Coach Dobbinmeyer, the coach of the London Raiders.
So I want to take a couple minutes, maybe give you a brief rundown of where we are with our football team, some idea of who's going to play where, and then just kind of throw it open for questions if you want to. It's kind of exciting to me that you guys are having this, because really, I think when we came to town 6 years ago, the interest in football seemed to be down a little bit. Whether it was down or not, the enthusiasm for it was certainly down, but it's back up. We feel we've got a great team this year. I think our program's going in the right direction, and we'll just try to give you a little bit about what's going on. I just came from watching West Jefferson, who was scrimmaging in Columbus Reedy. I don't know if all of you are aware of the fact that our league has changed. Last year was BAC East and West, and they changed the league this year. Jonathan Alder and West Jefferson, let me back up. If you remember when we started this whole thing, this whole BAC 5 years ago, it was supposed to be East and West, and Madison Plains and Jonathan Alder and London were supposed to be able to play each year for the league championship. Well, when Madison Plains dropped out a couple years ago, it really threw a monkey wrench in it a little bit. And then for some reason, I don't know why, they've now gone big school, small school division in football and not in any other sport. We still have East and West in every other sport with the exception of football. And Jonathan Alder and West Jefferson are now considered small school division schools. So we play them week 4 and week 5, but it's non-league football games. So we won't see a situation like we saw last year where 3 county teams are playing for the league championship really the last couple weeks of the season, which I really think is kind of unfortunate because that puts a lot more flavor into it. That doesn't mean the West Jefferson games aren't going to be important, but it certainly takes a little bit of the luster off. And because of the way the league has been reshaped, we now have in our league some of the teams we played last year: Washington Courthouse, Bexley, Olentangy, Big Walnut, Lakewood, and of course London. So our schedule looks pretty much the same because we played Big Walnut and Olentangy in crossover games the last 2 years. So they're not new to our schedule, but they are new to the league. As far as the prospects of the team, we have, I was kind of counting up in my head as we came over here, we have anywhere, depending on how you count, between 14 and 16 returning starters. We lost some real good football players last year. Of course, Cliff Williams and Adrian Terry and Aaron Roberts and Jeff Mathewson and Heath Robinson, some great football players. But we have some more than capable guys ready to fill those spots. The way it looks right now, if we go across the offensive line, looks like Lance Woodington's going to be our center. Lance is going to be about, I guess he's 6 foot, about 225, 230, depending on what day you put him on the scales. Had a great year in the weight room. Lance is the first football player we've ever had squat 500 pounds. I don't know if you guys, if that means anything to you, but it's quite a bunch of weight. And Lance he just had a tremendous off season. A lot of weight on him. 2 offensive guards, as we go into tomorrow night's scrimmage anyway. The one guard will be a young man's moved in from Odessa, Texas. His name is Ronnie Myers. And Ron's about 6 foot 6'1", 250 pounds. And is a sophomore and really athletic. It's quite a movement to be able to get. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Odessa, Texas or not, but there's been a book written about the high school football that takes place in Odessa, Texas. It's called Friday Night Lights. So you can tell just from watching Ronnie play that he's been involved in a good football program. He knows how to play ball. And he really came in and established himself. The other guard is going to be, right now, Ryan Bogenwife, who is only a sophomore. Ryan's about 6'2", 215 pounds. He has the upper hand right now only because senior Dave Nagy sprained an ankle about 10 days ago. It caused him to miss about 8 or 9 days of practice. Threw Dave a little bit behind. Dave's same size, 6 foot 215. So we feel that either one of those kids are going to be able to go in there and do a good job. And also be backed up by Adam Fincham, who sprained a knee yesterday in practice. And I was just saying back there that we haven't had our whole offensive line really together at all yet. But Adam's about 6'1", about 235, so he's a big boy too. And he's not going to play Friday night, but we know that down the road he's going to be one of those players. The two tackles are going to be on the left side. It's going to be Clay Miller. Most of you know about Clay. He's an all-league returner from last year, 6'1", 242. All-league defensive tackle. We're going to play him an offensive tackle as well this year. We just told him he's going to have to play on both sides of the ball. He bench presses about, well, he squats close to about 480, but he bench press about 360 pounds, so he's a pretty big boy. The other tackle is going to be junior Shad Goodwin. Shad started really the last 3 or 4 games for us last year, including the playoff game. Shad's 6'3", probably 250 on a good day, right around there. So you can see across the front, we got some pretty good beef in there, bigger than we've ever been since I've been in London. Our tight end is John Wilson. John is 6'5", 230, and John's athletic. And we're going to find a lot of different ways to get the ball to John this year, as opposed to we didn't throw the ball enough last year. But if you watched us play last year, you know that Adrian is such a good wide receiver. We need to get the ball to somebody, try to go to Adrian or to Bo. And we're just going to have to get the ball to John. Our wideouts are going to be Bo Williams will be one. Bo's about 6'3" or 6'4", probably 180 pounds, and made some unbelievable catches for us last year. We just know that he's going to have a great year for us, a wide receiver. Most guys we play against have those defensive backs who are about 5'9" or 5'10", so we like to have those 6'4" guys out there that can run. It's a great advantage for us. The other receiver right now appears to be Pete Grulke. He started for us one way last year in the secondary. Pete's 6'2", 190 pounds as a wide receiver. And he had never played football before last year. He's really learned how to play this summer, and we think he's going to give us a good year. Running backs and quarterbacks. I mean, quarterback is a question I know that everybody's wondering what's going on, because we had Jason Artis that started the first 9 games and had some academic problems, and Sean Kahn played quarterback against Jonathan Alder the 10th game, and then in the playoff game and did a great job. And as I stand here right now, I still can't tell you. We're giving Jason the first crack at it, and you'll see that tomorrow night at the scrimmage. But man, they're both really close. I was hoping Friday night at the scrimmage Saturday night, I'm sorry, that somebody would win that job. That was really our plan, but the weather conditions were so bad that it was really kind of hard to tell who was able to do what. We like Jason. One of the things we really like about Jason is he runs a legitimate 4.6 40. Now, I don't know if you guys, you hear people talk about that kind of speed all the time. This kid's a legitimate 4.6 40. We think that as we look at it, we want to go play in state championship football game. We think we have a chance to do that. And we want to make sure that we got a weapon every place. Not that Sean's not a weapon, but Sean's not a 4.6 40. And Jason can really get down the field for us in a hurry. The big thing we tell Jason is if he's going to be our quarterback, he can't be making the big mistake that's going to kill us. He's got to make sure that doesn't throw the ball away, make bad choices on his pass reads, and doesn't put things he needs to do to get us down the field. He knows that. Sean knows that. They're both very capable players, and that's made him win the job. Jason's about 6 foot 170. Sean's probably 5'10", 165, 170. Running back it's amazing. We got our fullback job is going to be probably between 3 guys right now. Scott Sims. Scott's 6'2", 215. Josh Larkins is 6 foot. He's also about 215. And Andy Roderball he's a small guy. He's about 5'10", 185. And all 3 of those guys are playing well there. And again, the scrimmage is going to determine who plays, but also probably during the course of the season, we'll spot play a lot of different guys. Tailback, Mike Harris returns from last year. Mike's only a junior. Mike rushed for 815 yards last year as a sophomore, which is a pretty amazing thing. But Fred Lester also played a lot back there last year. Fred was 3rd in the state in 100 meters. He runs a legitimate 4.4. It's the first time I've ever seen one out of coached. But Fred had a problem last year, as many of you know, with spondylitis. They were dropping the football, and he can't play because he's not going to hang on to the football. So we're hoping he's going to be able to hang on to it. And then, of course, they got Corey Bennett back there. You guys know what Corey's like. Corey can do just about anything on the football field, except he's not the fastest guy out there. But he'll get you up and down the field. He led our team, a lot of people don't know this, Corey Bennett led our team in total offense last year. Punt returns, kickoff returns, pass receptions, passing yards, everything combined. He had over 1,100 yards. So I guess a lot of people aren't aware of that. So we can use Corey. We can also use DJ Jackson, who's a sophomore, who potentially could be as good as any running back we've had. So we got a lot of guys offensively, and probably the biggest challenge we have is getting these guys to play together as a unit. A tough thing as a coach is guys have buddies. And when you've got as much competition going on as what we have going on right now, buddies sometimes tend to buddy it up. And when their buddy's not playing, they not only is one guy unhappy, but sometimes you can get 2 or 3 guys that are unhappy. And we just hope the guys are realistic enough to know that we're giving everybody a fair shot. The best guy's going to be on the football field. And you got to be man enough to tell their buddies sometimes, hey, you know, so-and-so deserves to be playing. And we think we've done a good job in the past of pulling them together as a team, and I believe we'll be able to do that again. Defensively, we shut out 5 of the 10 opponents we played last year. And in 2 other games, only the time they scored was a kickoff return. So really, we're looking at 7 shutouts last year. And about 7 players coming back from that defense. They're going to be in there again. We're going to be anchored at the defensive ends by Clay Miller, who's an all-league player. I already talked about Clay. He'll be one defensive end. Looks like Ronnie Myers, a guy from Texas, who moved in, will be the other defensive end. Defensive tackles right now are Anthony Brohart, who's a senior. Anthony is 6'2", about 260 pounds. The other defensive tackle right now is Jamel Napper. Jamel is 6 foot, 281. So across our front, we're going to go 252, 281, 260, 252 front 4. We think that's pretty imposing. We can stick Adam Fincham in there. He can play the defensive tackle. Excuse me, David Naked can play the defensive tackle. We've got some big boys that want to go across that offensive line. Shad Good can go in and play defensive end. Outside linebackers, and that's one of the things we think has been the key to our defense last year. The last couple of years, Adrian Terry played out there. Greg Huff a few years ago. Carl came a few years ago. Looks like it's going to be Bo Williamson and probably Fred Lester. Although John Wilson can go out there and play, and Mike Harris can play, and Michael Hughes, you guys may have seen him in basketball. First year as a football player, he's a great quickness out there. I just messed that up. Drew Dwyer has been moved outside linebacker. We have Drew down as a defensive end, and he's not big enough to play down inside as a defensive end. But we watched him on film, 2 films, and he just kept getting to the ball and getting the ball and getting the ball. And we moved him just on Tuesday to outside linebacker. So Drew will start with one, and Bo will start the other one. Drew's about 6'3" or 6'4", 190 pounds. Inside linebackers will be Sims, who's an all-league returning player. Probably Josh Larkin and Andy Rodeball, maybe even Jason Noden looking at that other position. Secondary has 3 guys coming back that played in there last year. Pete Grulke was a starter. Sean Connell led the team in interceptions, and Corey Benham was an all-league safety. So we've got 3 guys back there who've all played back there. We've got Donnie Raines, Mike Harris, some other young guys going to play in the secondary. Kicking game's going to be handled by Clark Tobin. Clark is really, really kick the ball. He went to a couple camps this summer, spent a lot of time, and believe it or not, we think he can put the ball in from about 50 yards out. In fact, he did one tonight at practice from 50 yards. And that's, for kids a sophomore in high school, it's a pretty amazing weapon to have. But those of you who watch us, we don't like to kick. You know, we get down close, we like to try to ram it in. But at some point, you have to have a capable kicking game, and we think we're going to have that. Pete Grulke right now, we're doing our punting, and kicking will be done by Clark Tobin. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something that I really think that probably the success, one of the things that's contributed to the success of our program is we now go into really our 5th year with our coaching staff pretty much intact. Mike Wilson, who's coached for us for about 4 or 5 years, 4 years I guess Mike coached. Mike's going back to school to get his teaching degree, so he's not able to coach this year. And we moved Tom Woodford up, who was our freshman coach last year. We moved him up to the varsity. But other than that, Mark Fire, and Norm Emmons are all intact, have been there. And I can't tell you how much easier it is to coach if your coaches don't already know what they're doing, know each other, know personalities and all that. I think it's a real strength of our program. Our off-season weight program has been tremendous. We have a lot of kids who didn't lift the way that they needed to, but we lift real hard during the month of August, and we lift real hard during the season. I think if we're doing our job as the season progresses, you'll find out that we are probably getting stronger as the year goes on. And you'll find out that we tend to come off the ball a little bit better the later we get in the season. As far as what our prospects are, we won 8 games 2 years ago. We won 9 games last year. And I'm not afraid to say I think this is the best football team I've ever had since I've been in London. And those of you who've been following this senior class in particular know that this is a group that you say, man, when these guys are seniors, that'll be the year, and they're seniors. And the attitude's good. We've had a few situations that always arise during 2 days where coaches and players have to knock heads a little bit. That's all part of it. And excited about the spunk and enthusiasm that this group has. They line up on the field. You see them out there tomorrow night, you'll be impressed with that physically. And hopefully the way they call the ball and hit. So I've covered about everything that I can think to cover. One other exception. They went to 6 divisions this year. It's neat because 4 years ago we had never been talking about the playoffs, but now it's realistic enough. 2 years in a row that we can talk about the playoffs. But they changed it. They went from 5 divisions to 6 divisions. And so what that did to us is it took some of the large or smaller Division II schools that were above us, were bigger than us last year, and it's brought them down into Division III. We are still Division III. But in our region of Division III, there are 7 teams that made state playoffs last year, either in 2 or 3. So we're really in a loaded region, including St. Mary's Memorial, who has won a state championship for the last 5 years, are now in our region. But if we have expectations to go where we think we can go, we're going to have to beat some of those good teams at some point anyway. Hamilton Ross is now in with us. They made it last year. And Franklin and Hamilton, Dayton. Of course, Dayton's been in there with us. But 7 teams have made the playoffs. Only 4 of us are going to get in, so it's going to be a dogfight. We think our schedule is good enough to get us in. We're going to have to win 10 games to get in. But we believe if we win 10 games, we'll get in. We traded Grandview, who is now a Division 5, a real small school, for Lakewood, who's a Division 3, same size as us. So we think that helps the schedule a little bit. Last year, Washington Courthouse was winless. Bexley only won 1 or 2. Madison Plains only won a couple. So we need some of those teams on our schedule to get a little bit better for us to be able to get in the playoffs again. Got to win the league first. That's our goal. But certainly get into the playoffs is a realistic goal. So I'd like to open it up for questions.
Sounds like you're concerned that even if we won all 10 games, there's still a possibility we wouldn't make the playoffs. Is that correct?
But I think that possibility exists, Jim, and I'm not worried about that. We're going to win all 10 games and then worry about it at the end. I do know this. Had we won 10 games last year, if we had beaten West Jefferson last year in this same division, as it's set up now, same region, we would have made it. 10 wins last year would have put us 3rd in our region, in this region the way it's set up. So I believe we won 10 games, we'll get in. I watch West Jeff tonight, they're going to be good. They'll win 8 or 9 or 10 games, just like they always do. They're not going to win 8 or 9 games like they always do. But they'll be a good team. Northeastern will be good again, Jonathan will be good. So they're still on our schedule, so we think we'll be okay. Can't win 8 games to get in anymore, I think those days are gone.
Been hampered by injuries?
Nothing big. We've had knee bangs. Adam Finch sprained the knee. Dave Daddy sprained an ankle, caused him to miss time. Just any time you miss time, especially during two-a-days. If you miss a week of two-a-days, it's like 2 weeks regular season because you're practicing twice a day. And you just don't get the repetition that you need, and you're rusty. And as an offensive line in particular, you guys try to get together up there and get a rhythm and a tempo and all that. And when you're shifting guys in and out, it makes it a little bit harder. And I think if you watch the scrimmage the other night, I don't think we came off the ball quite as well as what we needed to. Although I think they were pretty good too. And I don't know what you guys thought from where you were. Where I was, there was some cracking going on down that football field. There may not have been a lot of long runs and all that, but man, there were some bodies flying around. I think they'll be good. And it was a good scrimmage for us.
How do you assess Jared Alexander's performance in the scrimmage last week? Is it fair to assess?
He's only going to have to play when it's dry, somewhat dry. He gets to throw a little bit. We think Jared's a good quarterback. We really believe we could win with him this year if we had to. Some of the things that Jared does that are not as, for instance, he doesn't run the option maybe as good as Sean does or as good as Jason does. But he's got good poise. He does what he's supposed to do. We think he's a real capable player. Hopefully he's not going to have to play as a sophomore, but if the case were to arise where he would, I think he'd be more than able to do it.
So I have a question for you. As far as the 2 S's in football, it means scholastics and then salary. Of course, high school, college, we're about money.
Salary's low.
And nevertheless, in the implementation of making sure people aren't going to drop off, after the first grade period, anything that you're going to help them with as far as?
Well, we try to help them all the time. The situation that occurred last year really caught all of us by surprise. We had a situation where one of our quarterback came up academically ineligible going into the 10th week and just absolutely, caught us by surprise. We knew that he was somewhat in trouble, but we thought that he was taking care of business. And we find out that the two different things, he hadn't done something that he was supposed to do. There was not good communication between the head coach and the teacher. And we find out, man, he wasn't eligible. And it's not a situation where at the high school you would expect somebody just to throw him a grade. It wasn't that. It's just, God, I couldn't believe it. First of all, he didn't have enough classes. He was only carrying 5. Got to pass 4. He failed 2, only carrying 5. He was ineligible. Most guys out there are carrying 6 or 7 classes, and I think that it was probably scheduling problems much more. I think he learned a great lesson from that, and it's made him a lot more serious as far as concentration in a lot of areas. I think a lot of times coaches, we get a bum rap for that. I teach school all day. Our coaching staff teaches school all day. We coach football from 3 to 5:30. When I get home, I got a family I need to take care of. I can't be out with some kid making sure he's doing his homework. I think that becomes a responsibility of the parent. Now, when we're in school, we're certainly checking up on these guys. We know what's going on. But at some point, I can only do so much. The old adage, leading the horse to water. But we let them to the water. They're going to have to do it on their own. We do a lot of things in the off season to try to help kids with grades. We have study tables and a lot of things like that to try to make sure that they're getting their academics. But see, that brings the other side of it around, because then you hear people saying, well, he only cares about so-and-so because he's a football player. And my reaction is yes and no. Yes, I care about him because he is a football player, but I have no leverage with these other kids who aren't football players, these other ones that are just hanging out on the street. See, I think the Ohio High School Athletic Association makes a big mistake. If you're not academically eligible, you can't play sports. So we take these kids who really aren't doing the job academically, are going nowhere with their lives, and what do we take away from them? The only thing that can maybe give them some structure and some direction in their life. Rather than saying that they're not eligible, I think they ought to be able to go to the schools and say, okay, you need to put some stipulations, some probation, something on this kid to help him better himself. Or better yet, the kid that's ineligible, they ought to grab him and say, okay, you're playing football. We're going to get your life straightened up. You get out there and play football. Because we find out that when you check grades at the end of the 9 weeks, for the most part, our kids' grades are better than at any other time during the course of the year. Because they're busy and they're tired and they're focused on what they want to do. They feel good about themselves. When you feel good about yourself, you behave better. All the time, and a couple of teachers and one teacher here, I think she can attest to this. As soon as the football season's over, they start to misbehave because they don't have to report to the coach every day and all that. And it's tough because that situation happened last year. I came out with egg on my face, but what was I to do? Say, how can a coach let his quarterback be ineligible? My wife's asking me that question, I don't know, honey. He is. So let's go on with it. So let's hope that doesn't happen.
This Tobin kid that can kick off deep. It seemed like last year we ended up squibbing so many kickoffs.
That happened for a couple different reasons. Number one, I like the squib because it keeps the receiving team from getting organized. Nobody knows who's going to pick up the ball. We go down there and smash it. And another thing that was happening last year, we didn't feel that either guy that was kicking the ball deep was really doing the job from a coverage standpoint. We would kick it deep, and when we'd run down the field, we'd open up the lane, and we had 2 kickoffs returned early and another almost returned. And so as the head coach, I said, hey, enough of that stuff. We're not kicking the thing deep. Well, Clark, tonight in practice, he was consistently putting them inside the 5-yard line. So you figure we get a good win and kick the ball down the 5-yard line. Get good guys on the coverage team that can get down there. I think you'll see us kicking the ball deep this year. Be certain situations maybe where we won't. But for the most part, we'll try to pin them down there deep. We tell Clark if he can kick it in the end zone and make those other guys go 80 yards, they ain't ever going to win because we'll score and kick in the end zone. They got to go 80, and I don't think they'll be able to do that consistently.
Just field goal accuracy pretty decent.
Real good, real good. More than field goal, though, I worry about extra points. There's something really demoralizing about driving down the field, scoring a touchdown, and missing that extra point. And I believe it happened in the playoff game last year. And I'm not saying that to make either one of those kids feel bad. Man, you go down there and you score a touchdown, and you don't make that extra point. It's like, golly, you lose all the advantage. Field goals are nice. But how many times in the course of a football season are you going to try to make a 50-yard field goal? Never, unless it's the last second and a half or something like that. Most of the time, you're going to be talking about knocking one in probably 30, 35 yards out, and I believe Clark will be able to do that pretty consistently. Hopefully, we won't be in a situation where we have to kick it. We'd rather be able to take it on in, but who knows?
Any kids that are not playing football because of academic ineligibility?
None. Well, it's easy to say that off the top of my head. None that played last year. Now, there's always some out there that are probably academically ineligible, but they're not aligned to do anything else either. I mean, they're just kind of out there putting their time in. But every young man we can count on to come back and play football, from an academic standpoint this year, was able to play. And every kid that played on our football team last year, with a couple exceptions, are back on the team. And we think that's because we make it fun, and we think that we're fair. And I think they just like the atmosphere that they're in. We really try to build a real strong family atmosphere. And for a lot of kids, that's probably a close-knit a feeling as they'll ever have. Is what they'll have with some of the football players on Thursday nights and Friday nights and Saturday mornings whenever they happen to play. And I think, it's been a real key to our success. It's easy to be friendly with each other when you win, you know? Kind of feeds each other. But we weren't always winning, and I still think we lost that. It is contagious. Yeah. We try to tell the guys that it's important how you treat the least of us. And there have been two situations already this year, and I don't say this to pat myself on the back, but where I went to a home, drug a kid out of the house who was not a number one kid, but a down-the-liner that just kind of lost heart to wanting to come to practice, wanting to be at football practice, and took off at noon and went in his house, and the drug said, "You're not quitting, you're coming." And I think that when people realize that we need to take care of not just the A number one guys, but everybody. Everybody's a part of this, and we're here to win football games, but we're here to try to build men. That's what I said to one of those guys that drug out of his house. I'm trying to make you a man, and you won't let me. You've got to come out here and let us make you a man. And I really believe that kind of thing is contagious too. That it's not. We try not to make it phony if it appears phony. I'm sorry, but kids would see through that stuff if it were. And it's one of the things we try to really impress upon the seniors. And you've got to take care of those young kids. Every year we take a senior and a junior, and we give them a little brother on the football team during two-a-days that they have to be directly responsible for. If the guy's not at practice, he has to phone him and find out why. If I go check the weigh-in chart in the morning, and Bo Williamson, let's say Bo Williamson's little brother this year was David Harris, I believe. If I check down the weight chart and David Harris isn't there, the first thing I do is go to Bo. Say, "Bo, where's Dave?" And you'd be surprised the number of times guys say, "Gee, I don't know." And so we try to get them to realize that they got to quit being so selfish. They got to come in the morning and find somebody to care about and go check on them and make sure that they're okay. And if a guy didn't come to practice and his big brother doesn't know where he is, his big brother runs. We make the big brother pay a price for not having checked in on him. And there have been many times where that big brother just talking or calling the guy in the morning has gotten the guy there. And we think that's been a real success too. It's hard. Cliff Williams, I just talked to Cliff, is at Miami of Ohio, and a lot of people said that how difficult that was going to be to leave here and go play at Miami and all that stuff. And Cliff was home last weekend, and he said that he could not believe how much harder our high school practices were than what they are at Miami. Now, he said, that's not saying lining up and hitting a guy at 260 pounds. That part of it's harder, but as far as the running and a lot of the discipline, a lot of things that we do, he said that our program was really more difficult, prepared him. It made us feel good. Jay Hoy said the same thing when he went to Bowling Green. So we know that we're doing the right stuff. And sometimes I think parents will hear something that they find is so hard to believe, and most times it's not really the truth when they hear it. Most of us, they coach our parents. And we understand how you are with your own children. I know sometimes my kids bring home tales that aren't true. And that happens a lot with us too. A lot of times just a phone call straightens that kind of thing out. Our schedule, I think I told you, we open up week from Friday with Madison Plains. They have a new coach, Tony Brake. A lot of you maybe remember Tony when he was really part of my staff first year, 6 years ago. We open with them. Circleville will be the second game. I don't know how good Circleville will be, but I would hope that they'd be improved over last year. Then the third week we'll play Northeastern, who, we beat them 21-0, and they went on and won their last 7 football games and ended up being 8-2, and they look like they'll be pretty good again this year. And we've got Jonathan Alder. We're at Jonathan Alder, home with West Jeff, at Olentangy, at Washington Courthouse, home with Bexley, home with Lakewood, and end up home with Big Walnut. So it's like 3 of the last 4 games at home. We play home against against Madison Plains, and the next 3 home road. But,
How'd that happen? That means we're parking cars out there. It's going to be freezing.
It'll be cold.
I don't think I'll be chairing that project.
Yeah, and it'll be probably at that time of the year, there'll be some good crowds rolling in there then, I would think. West Jeff, you'll be parking a few cars for that one, I think.
The last game, I think it was quarter after 6, and we had that lot full, and it was my first year at the JC and chairing that project.
Now what do we
Where
do?
we're supposed to put people. And Paul Fetra's out there too.
Parking.
They're on their own.
Let them find their own thing. Steve?
I'm interested. How has, or what effect, if any, has the success on the varsity level have had in the program, in the reserve freshman, if you have it, junior high, youth programs in London? And how do you feel about youth programs?
Well, the easiest thing in the world for me to do is stand up and pound on my chest and tell everybody what a great program we're building. But the fact remains, when I came here my first year, which was senior class that year was, man, been so long, Lance Morgan was on him, Steve Corby, and Tim Dillian, names that you wouldn't know, Steve, but you guys know, there were some great athletes in those classes. And I remember that first year, I told my wife, after our first scrimmage, she says, honey, how are we going to be? And I said, man, I don't know. We beat the hell out of Heath, which was where I came from. Physically, I couldn't believe the bodies that we had. But it was an attitude problem. It really was an attitude problem. And I don't know if some of you guys have been around longer, I don't know if our bodies are that much better now. I really don't know. I can't give you the answer for that. I know our bodies now are good. Now, have they always been here? I believe they've always been there. But I think we've got it organized. Our JV team the last 3 years has been 27-2. Our JV team last year shut out 8 of the 9 opponents they played. Our freshman team last year was 9-0. Our junior high team, the 8th grade team wasn't real successful. 7th grade team looked like they're pretty good. And I think that all ties together as far as the biddy program all the way up. But let's face it, it's a football town. And I think people enjoy football. And I remember when I was a little kid about that, I used to go and watch my high school play, and I know now that people are taking their 10, 11-year-old kids, going down and watching us play at Dayton Welcome Stadium on the turf, and that kind of stuff just feeds it. It just feeds it. But I believe the athletes have always been here. You think back to days of Bill Hackett and, of course, LeBeau and all those guys that came through here, man, they've always been good. And what happened in the 80s, I really don't know. And I don't know if there's anybody really to blame about it, but I know that whatever went wrong ain't wrong anymore because they're sure out there playing ball. I'd also say this, that's not going on everywhere. We play a lot of teams that don't have a lot of kids out. We have on our varsity 55, we have about 19 freshmen, so we're looking at about 75, 74, 70 kids, which is pretty good numbers. We go to West Jefferson tonight, I think they had freshmen, they don't have enough for a freshman team this year, so they had probably 45, 50, I suppose. Washington Courthouse has like 35 all the way up through. So whatever's going on here is not going on everywhere. That's what I like about London because it is such a strong sports town. And I think that the people have high expectations for their kids and they know that hard work will pay off if they get in there and hammer away and work at it. And we see it all the way across the board. Tell a lot of people our football team, by making the playoffs last year, we're district champions. That's what it means when you make the state playoffs. Our boys basketball team was within a bucket of being district champions. Our track team was district champions. We're talking about the same kids. The starting 5 players on our basketball team will be starters on the football team. And those 5 guys will be players on the track team and on the baseball team. And I believe that the athletic program feeds itself. And I know that Dave Gustin, the basketball coach, and I don't fight over kids. It just doesn't happen. I don't say to kids, hey, you got to be lifting weights, and he doesn't say, hey, you got to be playing hoop. We let kids go be kids, and I think it's paid off.
We look forward to Clay Muller on the basketball team.
You know, I've seen that Orlando Pace, who's starting for Ohio State, they've asked him, to consider playing for the basketball team, you know?
But going back to Clay, I've really enjoyed watching him play defense the past couple of years. How do you think he'll adjust to offense?
He's wide, he's big and wide and strong. And I think that we'll give him good blocking angles. And if Clay's got a problem at all, sometimes he's not as tired as he thinks he is, if you catch what I'm saying. You know, he wears out sometimes mentally from fatigue. And he's not that tired. If we can encourage Clay to not be tired, I think he's going to be a whale of a player for us because he is so strong. He's got good balance and good feet, and if he comes off the ball, he's going to move some guys. But we're going to spell him. If we see him getting tired on offense, and we'll stick pinch him in a tackle, or we'll move somebody up. We'll figure out what to do. Defensively is where Clay's going to have to give it to us, and he will. He's a player.
Do you have team captains yet?
We have 4 captains, and we're Bo Williamson, Corey Bennett, Scott Sims, and Clay Noel. So we think we'll get great leadership out of it. I think a lot of times being a captain is overrated, though. You don't have to be a captain to be a leader, you know. And I think of some guys in that class. I think of John Wilson and Pete Grulke and Jason Arbus and Nagy. I think of some other kids in that class that are, you know, they can be just as good leaders. And people like to be captain because they get the picture in the program and all that stuff. But when we huddle up out there, 11 guys on the football field, I don't care who steps up and takes charge. Somebody's going to have to do it. And that's what the 4 captains are supposed to do. Sometimes that's not the way it happens. So we got great leadership. 19 seniors. That's where you win. If you don't have the seniors, you may win some, but you're not going to win a lot. That's why we thought last year when we went 9-1, we really in our hearts as coaches felt we were a year away because we only had 7 seniors.
How many returning players?
17.
You gonna do anything different this year than you did last year as play-wise?
No. I think we're pretty diverse. We like to spread the ball around. I'd like to see our fullback become a little bit more of the offense, really. You know, the fullback the past couple of years, Aaron Roberts, was a great blocker. And he was like a guard in the backfield. And I'd like to see our fullback, whether it be Sims or Rodaball or Larkins, whoever it is, become a little bit more the running attack. I think we need to do that to keep people honest up inside. You know, I would think that's probably the only thing that you're going to see. We do a lot of things from week to week, subtle changes that maybe the casual fan doesn't always see. Sometimes we'll make a formation change that somebody hasn't seen the week before. A lot of times we'll sit in a certain formation for 3 weeks in a row, so people are scouting this. We'll say, hey, this is what they do out of this formation, and then that next week do something different. So I think subtle changes like that are probably more important than changing the whole thing. We'll be doing basically the same stuff we've been doing. Hopefully,
Does all players get playbooks?
We quit doing that. I quit giving guys playbooks. I was my first few years I did that, and then I realized that there's a heck of a difference. If you get a playbook, there's a heck of a difference between looking at that on a piece of paper and doing it on the field. And for some guys, it was good to do it visually, but I found out that it ended up being a lot of work, and the program or the playbook ended up over at West Jeff, or it ended up at Jonathan Alder because somebody wasn't taking care of it anyway. And we have our system is so basic that really after 5 years now, most of those kids have already played under it. When we go through the first 3 or 4 days of practice, they got it. They really have it because they've done it the year before. And I don't know if we'll ever use the playbook again. We have certain things we'll put in, maybe a passing tree and some rules and regulations, but we don't give every kid.
You still go run a 4D on defense?
Yeah, we call it a 40, but it's more of a 60. We think one of the real keys to our defense has been we've taken those outside linebackers and we've walked them up on the end of the line. When the ball snapped, man, they come. There are very specific things they're looking at, but they don't look at them very long. They come. And we think that's been really, really important. Now, that can cause you a problem. If you think back to West Jeff last year, if you punch a hole in that front line, there aren't a whole lot of guys back there to tackle you. But we play an attack defense, and we're going to go at you. We think we're going to get to you more times than when you get to us. And so we'll sit pretty much in that base 60 and do a lot of different things across the front, a lot of different blitzes and stunts and that. And just get guys that love to go play defensive football. I think that's what Coach Emmets and Coach Kai have really done a great job of that. They're both so enthusiastic in practice that when we get in the game, man, they're like sharks going after blood on a good night. And I think last year's Northeastern game, that game was turned around last year when Adrian Terry blitzed in from the backside and separated the quarterback's shoulder. I think that whole game turned on that one play. That's the kind of defense we like to But hey, sometimes they get a ball down the field on you, catch it, and the other side gets all excited and everything, but we don't think that they're going to do that to us very often. We think that we'll get to their quarterback more times than they'll get it down the field. So we'll throw our ears, we call it throwing your ears back and going. That's what we try to do. We like to have guys that can run. We may not be as quick defensively. I thought we were pretty quick last year. But with 260 and 281 in there in the middle, they're not going to be quite as quick. But my goodness, some poor little guard's going to have to be moving them for 4 quarters. It'll be difficult. Steve?
Are there any rule changes for high school football for this year?
Big one. One really big one. Doesn't really affect the play so much. Excuse me. This year, if you get kicked out of a football game, you lose the next game. So, if, like we had a situation last year where Cliff Williams, I think, was in the bottom of a pile, and some guy's twisting his leg or whatever, and Cliff sits up afterwards and forearm shivers the guy against Big One, I think. Forearm shivered the guy, he threw him out of the game, which he really didn't deserve that. But this year, if that happens, he can't play the next week either. There's also a rule to try to do away with any type of fighting. If there's a fight that breaks out on the field, anybody who steps onto the field is kicked out, and kicked out the next week. Now, what I want to see happen is, in the 8th week of the season, get one of those brawls where everybody runs on there. Does that mean you don't play the next week? You know, I don't know. That's what the rule is. They're really trying to clean that stuff up. I think they've probably gone a little bit too far with it.
Yeah, how was the leagues or the OHSAA going to police this about knowing who's been kicked out and informing the opponents? And
at the meeting, Steve, it was amazing. At the meeting, they told the referee to stand back, watch, and write down numbers. Rather than trying to break it up, just write down numbers. You guys went on the field. And then they will file a report, and then the state will notify the school that so-and-so stepped on the field in the course of a fight. He's kicked out and can't play next week. Same holds true for a coach. If a coach gets thrown out of the game, he can coach during the week, but he can't be anywhere he's on the team on Friday night.
They're still using point scales?
Point scales.
Yeah.
As far as?
What West Jeff uses,
You mean for state playoffs? Yeah, that's changed. I don't know if I can explain. If I had a chalkboard, I could explain that to you. Let me tell you. Here's the way it goes. There are 6 divisions. To figure out who gets in the state playoffs, there are 6 divisions. Division number 1 are the large schools. That's guys over 450 boys in the high schools. Division 1, and Division 2 would be like 450 to 350, and then 3 would be 350 to 250. If you can imagine what I'm saying. So let's say London plays Madison Plains the first week of the season. Madison Plains is a Division 4 football team. There are 6 now. They're Division 4. If you beat a Division 4 team, you get 5 points for beating a Division 4. During the course of the year, every time, if we beat Madison Plains, every time they win a game, we get those points that they just beat that team. So if they're Division 4 and they beat a Division 4, Madison Plains gets 5 points for winning that game. We also get 5 points for them having won that game. So they say that getting into the playoffs is strength of schedule. It is not. It is strength of the schedule of the people you play. That's really where it is. Madison Plains, could Madison Plains play in the CBC with Urbana and Bellefontaine and those kind of guys? Probably not. But they could go down into the Kenton Trace League. They go down there and they win 4 or 5 or 6 games. Man, that helps us out just as much as if we play Urbana and they win 3 games up in their league. So that kind of stuff is important. And we think that having West Jeff and John Muller both on our schedule in the end helps us out. Last year we got in the playoffs because Jonathan Orr went 9-1 and Springfield Northeastern went 8-2. So we had 2 teams on there that really won on their schedule. Otherwise we wouldn't have been as good because Circleville didn't do anything, Madison Plains didn't do anything. And they've changed those totals this year because of 6 divisions. It helped us out a little bit. I mean, this is so complicated, but believe me, I know what I'm talking about. The point values of our schedule now are better than what they were last year. In other words, if you beat a Division 5 team last year, that was worth 2 points. This year, a Division 6 team is worth 3, so they bumped everything up. So in other words, those larger schools that are playing other larger schools, it used to be that a Division 1 school was getting double the points that we got every week. So if we play, let's say that, use an example of Kettering Alder. Kettering Alder was playing basically a Division I schedule. They could win 6 games and make the playoffs because they were playing those larger schools every week. They didn't have to win as many games. The point values have been somewhat evened out now, so that type of thing probably won't happen anymore. That now that school like us, that's Division III, that are playing Division III and Division IV schools, you win on your schedule, you probably will be in good shape. And I think it's probably a little bit more fair. There is no fair system. What I don't like about the current playoff system is, I remember 2 years ago, Carl King sprained an ankle. And we really had about 3 games there where Carl was not full strength. Had we not won those football games without Carl in there, we'd have never made the playoffs. But everybody knows that when Carl got healthy, what our football team was like. So if you get a guy who's hurt and he can't play for 2 weeks, and you lose those 2 weeks, and he comes back and you win all the rest of them, and you're 8-2, you don't get in the playoffs. And see, I don't think that that's fair. In basketball, everybody gets a chance, and at the end of the year, they find out who the best team is, not the team with the best record, who's the best team. And in the playoffs, you have to have the best record in order to even get a chance to be in there. And I'm not so sure that that's fair. Been some times that towards the end of the year, you play your best ball, maybe not get a chance to get in.
Last year we had kind of a real tragedy here in Madison County with a young football player at Alder. How do you guys police your student athletes concerning drugs and alcohol?
Probably not well enough, to be honest with you. Probably not well enough. If you can imagine before a football game, we walk in the locker room and you've got 60 kids in there. You don't know who's taking what. I mean, you really don't. You don't know some kid swallowing some. I think those were White Crosses or whatever it was that he was taking, that Richardson boy was taking. I don't know. We've had situations where I found out later that kids were, if you can believe this, trying to overdose on Mountain Dew because there's big caffeine rush in Mountain Dew, drinking lots of Mountain Dew and taking some of these over-the-counter things that you can get. It's really, really hard to police. And if we find out that a guy's doing that, during the course of the game, we get him out. Then after, we sit him down and say, hey, listen, man, we're not going to throw you in jail here, but do you have any idea what this can do to you? And for the most part, we think that puts a stop to it. We've had guys that have done that. And we found out after the game. They said, Coach, I just went down, I could go down to the drugstore and buy it. I didn't know there was anything wrong with it. They weren't doing it to be illegal, they're just trying to get an edge. And what happened with Richardson boy, it was something that was just to him, it was deadly because of the high blood pressure that he had. And he didn't know that certainly, but maybe the rest of us got a lesson out of that, I would hope. As far as steroids and that kind of stuff, maybe I'm naive, I don't see it. We watch it pretty closely, and I don't see the signs of it. The signs of it, really, a lot of times there's a lot of acne on the back. Find out that boys who are lifting weights and are using these steroids tend to get a little fatty deposit right under the pectoral muscle that tends to develop there. And we don't go around checking, but guys in the weight room lifting, you can pretty much see what's going on. I don't see it. I think there's a lot of information out there about it. I think kids understand what steroids do to you, but that doesn't mean that some kids won't be looking for an edge. We try to do the best we can with it. We think our biggest problem, maybe not on the football team, but the thing that we're always most worried about is alcohol. And I think that's one thing that most people tend to just look the other way about. I really believe that's our biggest concern as to whether or not our football players are drinking on Friday or on Saturday nights. I would hope not. And we have a policy that says that they're not supposed to, but I don't know. And I think we've been so lucky here in London that we haven't had kids cracking up against, running into poles and all that stuff, drinking and driving, And I would hate to think that it takes something like that to really wake parents up. As football coaches, for the most part, when the game's over, it's a parent's child. I don't know what goes on. And I just hope that the parents police that good enough. I think that's a problem that we're really, really looking past. I don't understand why in our society you can buy alcohol at a gas station. They say they're against drinking, but yet you can go in and get a tank full of gas and a tank full of beer. It doesn't make sense. But that's the society we live in, I guess. Didn't mean to proselytize there, or whatever. Get on my soapbox.
So have you been scouting Madison Point?
I have not seen them personally. We saw them last week, and we'll have a scout down there tomorrow. And you can look at everything, read all you want to, until we eyeball You really don't know. They'll be improved. I'm sure they'll be improved, because 2 years ago they had these kids who are now seniors were a pretty good JV team. And I think that they'll be improved. But they have to come up here and play. We haven't lost at home in 2 years.
No.
In fact, I don't believe we gave up a touchdown in this field last year. This is becoming a pretty tough place to play. And we welcome them to come in here if they have to, I guess. We look forward to it. We're ready to get going.
I was just asking, that's my one school.
Is that? Well, say it with pride.
We always do.
Hope they win 9 of them. I'm sorry?
Do you think we're getting enough fan noise at the stadium?
You know what I think happens, Bob? And this sounds like a crybaby. I think fan expectations are so high that you become complacent, you know? You go out there and one week you beat somebody 47-0, and the next night that you're playing it's only 14-0 at halftime. You're thinking, man, what's wrong here? What's wrong with these boys? They're just not playing very well tonight. And I get guilty of that sometimes. But what I find happens is the fans, once the team gets gone, then the fans get into it. Sometimes it'd be nice if the fans got into it, because that would get the team going a little bit, you know. I think we have great following. I think we have a great following. We just got to remember that they're young kids out there. Got to remember how far we've come and have our expectations high, but still appreciate the moment, what's going on out there at that time. I would also hope that the people just really temper what they yell at kids. You know, they can yell at me all they want to, because I get paid to do it. I've heard some pretty mean things yelled at a kid out there in the field, and it's just a kid, you know. It's just a kid. It's somebody's kid. And our idea as coaches, we try never to embarrass them. Sometimes, hey man, they do something out there that they end up getting embarrassed over. But for the most part, we try to tell them, we're not going to embarrass you publicly, unless you have to do something foolish. But I hear some things in the stands that somebody yelled out at my kid, Bob, that'd be pretty hot, you know. It'd be hard to sit still. And I would just hope the parents, fans, whoever they be, realize those are just kids and approach it that way. Stay behind us. It's great. I'll never forget, Bob, the first year we made the playoffs, when we went down to Xenia. Remember it was snowing down there? It was so cold that night. And when we came out of that locker room, I could not believe the crowd that was there. I mean, just even the conditions. It was unbelievable. And I would just hope that we could get that kind of following all the time, you know? All the time. Sometimes it's a downer. People say, well, gee, I'm not going to drive all the way to Washington Courthouse because we're going to murder Washington Courthouse anyway. Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it, you know? We're down there representing our community. I hope the community would get together and follow us no matter where we go, no matter how bad we're going to win or whatever. And I just think that it's going to be an exciting year. And I hope people understand that, get behind us and go. Steve?
The slogan, one heartbeat.
Well, it's last year's actually.
Oh, okay.
It is last year. Our slogan this year, we've rarely had kind of catchy phrases. I remember 2 years ago, or 1990, when we won the league, it was "Count on me," because we felt that really at that time in our program, you couldn't count on anybody, you know. So we made the kids be saying that to each other, "Hey, you can count on me," and that caught on. Last year, our slogan was "One heartbeat," that we have to all be on one heartbeat if we're going to be successful. This year, I think it's kind of neat what we've done. We've taken on the back of our shirts, and we've written down everything we've done in the decade of the 90s, which was 1990, we were CBL champs. In 92, we were BAC champs, state playoffs. In 93, BAC champs, state playoffs. And then on the front of the shirt, it says Lemon Red Raiders, and inside here, it says, "And then some." Meaning, hey, we've done all this. But then, whatever it is, there's got to be more that you can do. Do whatever you can, and then some. Block as much as you can, and then some. Run as hard as you can, and then some. And we just hoping that type of attitude, always trying to do more, achieve a little bit more, will get us to where we want to go. Is that it?